Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Felicita Monteblanco. I'm Vice Chair of the Washington County Planning Commission, and I will be chairing the meeting this afternoon. Today is January 7th, and this afternoon's meeting of the Planning Commission is called to order. May we have the roll call, please, Clerk Aguilar?
Yes. Commissioner Carlson doesn't look like she's online right now. Commissioner Fry is not as well.
I'm here.
Or is he? Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Just?
Present.
Commissioner Peterson?
Present.
Commissioner Rosenberry?
Present.
Commissioner Whibbs?
Present.
Commissioner Morgan Will does not look like he is present right now. And Chair Monteblanco.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. May we have the director's report, please?
I always forgot. My laptop was in the way. Thank you, Chair and members of the Commission. I'm Carol Johnson, Planning and Development Services Manager. I've got a director's report for you today. I will make a few announcements, and then I'll be turning it over to Assistant Land Use and Transportation Director Erin Wardell to talk about some recent board decisions and expected action on the county's community participation program. So other actions that took place at yesterday's board meeting included adoption of the A Engrossed Ordinance 908. That was regarding the Metro Center boundaries, and also Ordinance number 910, which is the Forest Grove Urban Planning Area Agreement. As recommended by the Planning Commission, they also ordered engrossment of Ordinance 909, which is the Cornelius Urban Planning Area Agreement. We needed to make a couple adjustments to the map for that item. The members of the commission are authorized to fulfill 2 four-year terms. The first term of 2 of our members will end on January 31st. Those are for Chair Maury Badu and Commissioner Will. Chair Maury Badu has reapplied for a second term, while Commissioner Will has not. His term will end once a replacement position, replacement commission member has been appointed by the board. Staff will be discussing options at a commission work session on January 20th about how to proceed with filling the 1 vacancy. We'll be recommending reappointment of Chair Maury Badu and requesting board direction on whether to fill the vacancy with the existing group of candidates that we have or to move forward with a broader recruitment. And then the formal board action would take place on February 3rd. Our Community Development Code Assessment Project is moving forward. The next Technical Advisory Committee meeting will be held on January 21st, and the packet for that meeting will be going out today and will be posted on the project website if anyone is interested. People that have already signed up will be receiving a constant contact message with information and a link to that packet. And then prior to your February 18th work session, we'll be having an update on the final draft report for the code assessment. We also wanted to remind the Commission that on the Community Development Codes that states that the Planning Commission should elect and install a chair and vice chair at their first meeting after January each year. And that meeting is likely to be coming up on February 18th. So we'd like everyone to consider one of those positions or who you might want to nominate. For today's agenda, we'll be having 1 hearing regarding Ordinance 912, which is to amend the Rural Natural Resource Plan and Community Development Code relating to allowances for rural accessory dwelling units and rural historic accessory dwelling units. And then in terms of upcoming schedule, January 21st may be canceled if we don't require a second hearing on today's item regarding rural ADUs. February 4th is proposed to be canceled due to staff schedules, and then February 18th will be proceeding so that we can conduct the chair-vice chair elections and also provide an update on the CDC assessment. So if there are no further questions, I'd like to ask Assistant Director Erin Waddell to come up and give us an update on changes to community participation program.
Thank you, Carol. I'm going to fix my nameplate and be official. Thank you. My name is Erin Wardell. I'm the Assistant Director of the Department of Land Use and Transportation. For those of you who are newer on the Planning Commission, you may not know that my previous role was Planning and Development Services Division Manager, and prior to that, I was the Transportation Planning Section Manager. So I spent some time with the Planning Commission over the years, and I'm really happy to be here today. The purpose of my conversation with you today is to give you an update on what the board is planning to do with the county's community participation organizations and the Committee for Citizen Involvement. The county has had a community participation programs going back to the 1980s, and over the last couple of years, there has been an effort to modernize that program, to align it with just more modern ways of doing community engagement and ways that are more effective to reach out to our growing and changing Washington County community. In December, the board held a work session to consider some options for what the CPO program and the CCI could look like moving into the future. And yesterday, they held a public hearing on a proposal for a new resolution and order. That resolution and order would rescind the previous resolution and orders, which again go back to the 1980s, and implement a new structure for how the county will do community engagement. After a discussion yesterday at the meeting, the board decided to postpone their decision action until the January 27th meeting. So I'm going to give you an outline of where I believe the board is heading with this, but I want to be really careful that they haven't taken formal action yet. So this is based on how the conversation went yesterday and what we expect to see in the resolution and order that they consider on January 27th, but it's not official yet. So there will be a lot more conversations before this happens. So based on the proposal that was brought forward yesterday, the board is considering transitioning the Community Participation Organization Program into a new structure where there would be 4 CPOs, 1 for each of the commissioner districts. That's different from the current model where there are, I'm not sure exactly how many, but a number of CPOs that represent much smaller geographies and are not aligned with commissioner districts. The process of this implementation would obviously need some fine-tuning. There will be some changes in the existing structures. There will be some changes in how staff manage 4 CPOs as opposed to a larger number of CPOs. All of that is yet to be determined, but we expect that that will be the direction. The 4 CPOs will then retain their status as formally recognized neighborhood organizations, which is relevant for land use planning purposes, because formally recognized neighborhood organizations have a special status when it comes to land use appeals. And then the alignment with the commissioner districts, there is an idea that that will lead to a more effective communication with the assigned elected official for each of those districts as well. So that's what we believe the proposal will be for the CPOs. If you are familiar with the existing structure of the current Committee for Citizen Involvement, the CCI is currently made up of the leadership of the CPOs. Under the new proposal, the Planning Commission would assume the Oregon Administrative Rule requirements and responsibilities of a CCI. Washington County's interpretation and implementation of a CCI is one approach. Again, it's one we've been using for a number of decades, and it's been effective. But it's not the way it's required to be according to statute or according to Oregon Administrative Rules. Oregon Administrative Rules, Goal 1, citizen involvement, really important for land use planning. This is something all of us study when we're in planning school and live by every day. So Goal 1 for citizen involvement requires all jurisdictions to have a committee for citizen involvement. This committee has a really important charge in that it is important for committee members to represent the jurisdiction, to have geographic diversity, and a variety of different interests so that they can effectively represent for the community. The Oregon Administrative Rule then outlines that this designated committee is responsible for assisting the governing body with community participation, essentially, and representing for community views in land use planning decisions and in processes, and implementing a way for community members to weigh in on land use planning processes. It specifically states within this Oregon Administrative Rule that a jurisdiction may choose to delegate this authority to their planning commission. Many jurisdictions in the state of Oregon choose to do that. It makes a lot of sense because of the close alignment with land use planning. Some jurisdictions do something differently. We've been doing something differently here at the county for a number of decades, and so this will be a change from what we've done previously. There's a number of different ways that we could choose to do this. There's a number of different directions the board could choose to go, but we think this is going to be the direction that we move forward. So, I'm sure a lot of you have questions about what that actually means for the Planning Commission, and I don't think that I necessarily have all of those answers today. It will be a change. It could mean that we will spend more time doing training on community engagement with the Planning Commission. I think it's very likely that you will see more items on your agenda that relate to how we engage with our community. It's been a very normal practice for us to share community engagement on planning projects with the Planning Commission. It's of course very normal for you to have members of the community come and provide public comment and provide testimony, and for you to consider what you hear from them as a part of your actions. I also know all of you are active members of the community and you're talking to people all the time and then bringing those perspectives in with you. So in some ways it's a transition for the Planning Commission, but I think it's also very in line with what your normal responsibilities are. We will all be learning together as we move forward in this transition, and I think that there will probably be some changes as we go along too. Maybe we'll try some things and then learn a little bit and then try something a little bit different. So with that, I know that's a lot of information and some of this is brand new to you, but I'm happy to entertain any questions if something has come to your mind.
Any questions? Commissioner Cross?
Thank you. I appreciate this, and I'm really encouraged that we are looking at how we handle public engagement, because it's even more important today. One thing I would like to hear, with whatever we choose to do and condensing them into 4 different CPOs maybe instead of the current structure that we have, is if that is really being responsive enough and the locations they're at. I want to make sure that they're being held at times that a vast majority of people in a particular area can get to, or have a ability to get to, and they're being held at times that maybe varying the different times, so we can make sure folks maybe who work or have family responsibilities in the early evening, that we're making sure that we get a huge, a larger swath of our community being able to attend.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think that's really good feedback, and we'll make sure to pass that along. I do want to clarify, the county's existing program, CPOs and the CCI have this really close connection because CPO leadership make up the CCI, and both of those are managed through the Office of Access and Opportunity. Under the proposal for the new structure, the CPO program and those 4 organizations would still be managed by the Office of Access and Opportunity, but again, that CCI function would fall into the Planning Commission. So we will take that feedback and pass it on to the other office.
Any other questions, folks online? I have one question. With this change, do we envision there will be additional resources for the planning department? Because I'm hearing more work. Will there be more resources?
That is something that we will be continuing conversations about, and we may not have a firm answer about for a couple of months.
You mentioned this, but I just want to emphasize, I think that anything that we as planning commissioners can do to be better at identifying strong, effective ways to communicate, to engage with the community. I think as a whole, we could probably get better at that, right? Especially if we're going to be critiquing it and passing things. So I know I certainly have a level of expertise, but I always want more, and I'm sure there's lots I need to learn, and I'm guessing my peers have lots to teach me, but also to learn as well. So
thank you for that feedback. And That's part of our conversation with the Office of Access and Opportunity as well, and we have asked them, and again, this is all still evolving, but we thought something like an annual training and community engagement best practices for the Planning Commission would, quite frankly, be something great to bring forward whether or not this change was happening.
Agreed. Yeah. That would be fabulous.
Let's do that.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Wardell.
Yeah, if anyone does have any questions later, feel free to reach out. We're happy to work with you to answer those. Thanks.
As of a few minutes ago, we do not have anyone, nope, we have no one who's signed up to speak up on issues, on matters not on the agenda. Still valid? Okay. Next page. The next item is a public hearing. Nope. Where's this? The next item is a public hearing on ordinance number 912. May we please have the staff report?
Thank you, Vice Chair Monteblanco and Commissioners. Teresa Cherniak, Community Planning Section Manager. The item before you today is a hearing on the rural changes to the Rural Natural Resource Plan and Community Development Code to allow rural accessory dwelling units. Todd Borkowitz is going to give the presentation.
Thank you, Teresa, and good afternoon, Chair Monteblanco. Vice Chair Monteblanco and members of the Planning Commission. For the record, I'm Todd Borkowitz, Senior Planner with the LUT Community Planning Group. And as Teresa indicated, I'm here to present on Ordinance 912, which would allow accessory dwelling units or rural ADUs in the rural residential areas of the county. So today we'll begin with defining an ADU and noting some of the common characteristics. We'll next provide an overview of the rural ADU types now that are now allowed by the state, and then feedback we've received from the Planning Commission and from the community. We'll then share our analysis of the state's rules on rural ADUs and amendments that we are proposing through Ordinance 912 to the county's comprehensive plan in order to allow them. Lastly, we'll share the staff recommendation for the ordinance. So a little about ADUs. An ADU is a residential structure used in connection with but secondary to a single detached dwelling unit on the same lot. An ADU is typically less than 1,000 square feet, has its own kitchen, bathroom, and sleeping area. An ADU can either be attached to the primary dwelling or detached from it, and it can also be a converted attic, garage, or basement space. So the county has long allowed ADUs in the urban area, in areas where single detached dwellings are allowed. In 2019, the county expanded its rules in the urban area to allow up to 2 ADUs per lot under some conditions. State rules for ADUs in the rural area are far stricter than rules for ADUs in the urban area. For many years, the only accessory units allowed in the rural area were for farm worker housing in exclusive farm use districts. In 2017, partially as an incentive to preserve old farmhouses, the state allowed the conversion of one existing historic home, defined by the state as a home built between 1850 and 1945, to an ADU when a new primary dwelling is built. So a historic home ADU is only allowed in rural residential lands, which are areas that the state deems low priority for farming and forest use. In 2021, the state allowed 1 new ADU per lot on rural residential lands when 1 single detached dwelling exists, and the state added several more restrictions on where these new rural ADUs could be sited. So like I said, the state now enables counties to allow these 2 types of rural ADUs within rural residential areas. A rural historic ADU is the term that we will be using for the conversion of an existing historic home to an ADU when a new single detached dwelling is built. And then a rural ADU, again, is the new ADU that is accessory to an existing single detached dwelling. And these 2 rural ADU types have similar state rules, but they also have some key statutory distinctions that I'll be discussing later in this presentation. So that brings us to Ordinance 912. This ordinance will amend 2 comprehensive plan elements, including policies in the Rural Natural Resources Plan and several sections of the Community Development Code, or CDC. The ordinance would allow 1 new ADU, or the conversion of 1 historic home to an ADU, in the county's rural residential districts, subject to the state's limitations and requirements. I would also clarify and add consistency to other CDC sections, including that we now be referring to ADUs in the urban area as urban ADUs to make them distinct from the rural ADUs. So the Board of Commissioners authorized this rural ADU ordinance last year through adoption of the Planning Work Program for 2025 through 2027. And as you may recall, we presented this topic to the Planning Commission in a work session on June 18th. Then in July, the county publicly released issue paper number 25-01, ADUs in the rural area, and held a 30-day public comment period. We filed ordinance number 912 on December 3rd and provided public notice and of these ordinance hearings. So the county considered several policy questions on the rural ADU types allowed by the state, including whether to allow 1 or both ADU types. If both, should both rural ADU types be subject to the same or similar standards? And then what regulations, if any, should the county consider for rural ADU types? The county also analyzed where in the county rural ADU types could be allowed and how the state's minimum standards and allowances impact the siting of rural ADUs. We also analyzed several policy issues and where and under what circumstances rural ADU types are allowed in other Oregon counties. So ordinance development was influenced partially by input received from the Planning Commission and from community members. In your June work session, PC members supported flexibility in the rules for rural ADU types to encourage housing development. You recommended allowing both rural ADU types and applying the same or similar regulations when it makes sense to do so. 18 community members provided written comments during the 30-day public comment period on the issue paper. Most supported rural ADUs, including AARP Oregon, which represents the needs and interests of people 50 and older. Others had concerns about rural ADUs, including several who opposed vacation occupancy of the ADU as opposed to allowing rural or they were opposed to allowing rural ADUs altogether. And then we also received about a dozen inquiries about building ADUs in the county's rural area using the proposed rules. To date, we received 3 letters of testimony at ordinance number 912, and these 3 letters have been provided to the Planning Commission. So on to our analysis. Here is a land use map of the county's rural area. Oh, thank you. The green areas comprising the majority of the rural area are EFU, EFC, and AF20, known as resource districts, and they're where rural ADU types are not allowed. The yellow and brown areas are the county's rural residential districts, the land use districts where both rural ADU types are allowed. The rural residential districts include Agriculture and Forest District 10, 10-acre minimum, or AF10, Agricultural and Forest District 5-acre minimum, or AF5, and Rural Residential 5-acre minimum, or RR5. So several other factors determine whether a rural ADU or rural historic ADU can be allowed. These are the state's minimum requirements that counties must uphold when allowing one or both types of rural ADUs. In addition to being within a rural residential district, both rural ADU types may not be within an urban reserve or on lots smaller than 2 acres. These are state requirements, again, that both rural ADU types must meet. Rural ADUs have additional state restrictions that do not apply to rural historic ADUs. Rural ADUs may not be on a lot that is within an area of critical state concern, and just to note, the county has none of these. Or they may not be on a lot that is subject to a state-defined nuisance. Rural ADUs, but not rural historic ADUs, must be served by a fire protection service provider. If the rural ADU's water supply source is a well, no portion of the lot may be in an area where the groundwater use is restricted. Again, rural historic ADUs do not have groundwater limitations. Each of these state minimum requirements serves as a sort of filter, limiting the breadth of lots where rural ADU or rural historic ADU can be cited. The rural ADU's issue paper contains estimates on the quantity and location of lots given these state restrictions. So the county determined that the following conditions exist in parts of Washington County that limit where rural ADUs are allowed. So the county contains several urban reserves, mostly immediately adjacent to urban areas. They contain groundwater restricted areas, largely to the in the southern portion of the county. Areas that do not have fire protection service provider for residential structures. And we assume that there's a potential for several lots to be subject to an order or pending action declaring a given lot a nuisance as defined by the state. So here's a map showing where, sorry about that. Here is a map showing where state law would allow rural ADUs. Eligible lots are shown in blue. Areas in blue contain several lots in rural residential districts that that are over 2 acres. They are not in urban reserve, which are shown in dark gray. Lots with a state-designated groundwater restricted area, mostly to the south portion of the county, are shown as eligible lots only if they are supplied by an outside water provider. So those kind of are the blue lots kind of at the center, middle of the map with that hatch over them. Otherwise eligible lots in areas not served by a structural fire protection service provider, mostly in the north and west portion of the county, are not shown due to the state restriction. So here's a map showing where the state law would allow rural historic ADUs. Again, eligible lots are shown in blue. Like the map of the rural ADUs, areas in blue contain lots in rural residential districts that are over 2 acres and not in an urban reserve. Unlike the map for rural ADUs, however, lots within the state-designated groundwater restricted area and not served by a structural fire protection service provider are shown because these state restrictions do not apply to rural historic ADUs. While considerably more potentially eligible lots are shown on this map than on the previous one, the actual number of potentially eligible lots will be significantly less, or will presumably be significantly less, since a lot must also contain a historic home in order to qualify for a rural historic ADU. So the previous maps only showed where state law would allow rural ADUs and rural historic ADUs. The county cannot be less restrictive than state law, but can add requirements that are more restrictive. Given this, Ordinance 912 proposes 2 additional requirements for rural historic ADUs that would make county rules to create a rural historic ADU more restrictive. They are, 1, that lots with the rural historic ADU must not be subject to an order or pending action declaring the lot a nuisance, and that rural historic ADUs must be served by a structural fire protection service provider and have adequate access for firefighting, equipment, safe evacuation, and staged evacuation. So both of the proposed additions for rural historic ADUs are requirements that the state law applies already to rural ADUs. Ordinance 912 proposes these added safeguards to better ensure public safety. So here's the same map that I last showed. Here is the same map that I last showed, where state law would allow rural historic ADUs. And this is overlaid with the hatch area, showing areas not served by a structural fire protection service provider. And that hatch is off to the west and north on this map. The red circles highlight areas with otherwise eligible lots that the county, per the rules proposed in Ordinance number 912, would not allow rural historic ADUs. So in addition to the factors established by the state for citing a rural ADU or rural historic ADU on a lot, the state also has several minimum standards that apply to rural ADU types. These are shown in Table 3 of the staff report and on the following slides. So both rural ADU types may not be on lots that are subdivided or partitioned so that the primary dwelling and rural ADU are on different lots. Only one rural ADU or rural historic ADU is allowed per lot. The primary dwelling and rural ADU type are considered one unit for purposes of calculating density. New rural ADUs may be detached, internal, or attached to the primary dwelling, but rural historic ADUs must be detached from the new primary dwelling. And both must comply with applicable laws for sanitation and wastewater disposal and treatment. Again, these are all state requirements. So continuing, a statute for rural historic ADUs explicitly allows but does not require counties to require that new primary dwellings be served by the same water supply source as the rural historic ADU. There is no such mention of a common water supply source in statute for rural ADUs. Rural ADUs are limited to 900 square feet of usable floor area. For a historic home that will become the ADU, the historic home cannot be modified so that the square footage is more than 120% of the home square footage at the time construction of the new dwelling starts. Lastly, rural ADUs must be within 100 feet of the primary dwelling unit and have adequate setbacks from adjacent lands designated for resource use. The state has no maximum distance requirement for rural historic ADUs and their new primary dwellings. Rural historic ADUs may not be rebuilt if lost to fire. No such rule exists for rural ADUs. State rules for wildfire maps were repealed in 2025, so they no longer apply. Lastly, a rural ADU and its primary dwelling unit may not be used for vacation occupancy. State statute is silent on this for rural historic ADUs, but the county believes vacation occupancy is likely not allowed at all in rural areas. So ordinance number 912 does not significantly modify these state provisions. It would allow a common water source or separate sources for a rural ADU type and its primary dwelling. The ordinance proposes to use the term habitable space in place of usable floor area to be consistent with state building code and terms used in the community development code. It would not allow vacation occupancy in either the rural ADU or in a rural historic ADU. So in addition to the proposed CDC changes, Ordinance 912 proposes minor text amendments to implementing strategies and summary findings and conclusions for two policies of the Rural Natural Resource Plan in order to include rural ADUs and rural historic ADUs as permitted uses in rural residential districts. These changes are needed to establish an adequate policy basis to allow ADUs in the county's rural areas. And that's Ordinance 912. So we ask the Planning Commission to conduct the public hearing and recommend approval of Ordinance 912 to the Board of Commissioners. And on that, thank you, and we are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from commissioners?
Thank you guys for all the work you've done on this. I just had one question. What constitutes vacation occupancy? Is there a certain number of nights or days or anything like that? Like, is it if you lease a home for a year, is that one, or are we talking like 2 weeks or less type of a thing?
No, that's a good question. I actually have so it's the state definition, statutory definition, and I'm just going to read it here. It means occupancy in a dwelling unit, not including transient occupancy in a hotel or motel, that has all the following characteristics. Occupant rents the unit for vacation purposes only, not as a principal residence. The occupant has a principal residence other than the unit, and the period authorized by occupancy does not exceed 45 days.
And one of the operative terms there is for vacation purposes, so we know there are situations, for instance, traveling nurses or doctors where they might rent for a short period of time. It's not a vacation, they are coming there for work, and that sort of thing, I think technically under this definition would not count toward that. So this is really about people, yeah.
Thank you for having that handy. Any other questions? Anyone online? It was such a thorough presentation. Let's see. Now I'd like to open the public hearing. Clerk Aguilar, you provided me some folks who want to testify. I will go ahead. First up is Robert Bailey. On deck is Suzanne Smith. Also on deck is Jacob Vander Eames. Robert, you'll have 2 minutes. Thanks for coming.
You bet. I submitted my testimony in writing yesterday and was informed that it would be distributed to you. If there are any questions, I'm open to responding. Save Helvetia has been historically concerned about vacation rental and short-term rental and made comments during the urban unincorporated planning process and wanted to reiterate our concerns for that. There was also reference in the issue paper about undesignated land, a term used during the urban and rural reserve planning process. And our understanding of undesignated was not for development, didn't need protection for agriculture, and was kind of beyond the need for designation. And there was some reference to is undesignated land available for the state housing crisis. And we would strongly object to that theory or approach. Any questions?
This is your time to talk.
Say it again?
This is your time to talk.
Oh, okay. Well, again, I submitted the comments in writing, and so that's what I have to say.
Well, thank you, Mr. Bailey, for coming in. We did receive the information. It was sitting here waiting for us. I read it, so thank you. Very helpful. And I appreciate you coming in today.
You bet.
Next up, we have Susan Smith. Or Suzanne, apologies. You'll have 2 minutes.
Hi, I'll be fast. We just read this information the other day, and there was a comment in there from a gentleman from Gaston where he talked about the 100 feet and the consequence of his topography, where he could not put a ADU on his property because of that within the 100 feet of his house. And I couldn't tell from the conversation from the planning department if that was a state rule or if that's a proposed county rule. And if it's a proposed county rule, I would recommend some allowance for people who live on property where it would be difficult for them to site it within 100 feet of their primary residence. Because his argument made sense. It was very sensible. So thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Jacob Vander Eames. You'll have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I wanted to come as a property owner, and we are a multi-generational family and trying to live on the same property and keep it within the family, and we would like to be able to continue that tradition and create a space where my parents and or my in-laws can age in place next to their family members, and then we can take care of them. We have just as a family taken care of through end-of-life care. My grandmother-in-law, and that was a very sweet experience and really helped our family out to be able to be together, but also have them close. So ADUs, very in support of them to be able to help families like this. I would also like to echo those comments about the 100 feet rule because we live on a hill and it makes it incredibly difficult to find a suitable place without massive groundworks that just makes it financially not feasible. One thing that I did learn today in the presentation is that our property is situated in the groundwater conservation area, which excludes us because we are one street over the line. I understand that this is a state rule that is imposing a limitation from the presentation, but I was wondering if there was any possible way to have water use restrictions agreements put in place or something like that as a way to continue to use our well. We use it very minimally. We draw very little water, but being over that line, just a couple 100 feet, automatically excludes us. And that's my time. Thank you for hearing my comments.
Thank you. Clerk Aguilar, do we have anyone online who wants to give testimony?
No, we don't. No one that has raised up their hand. Would anyone in the virtual audience like to testify in front of the Planning Commission on this ordinance? Please raise your hand if so. I don't see any hands raised.
Thank you. So I'll go ahead and close the public hearing, which means we can deliberate afterwards. Let's see. Hereby close the public hearing. And then let's move to deliberation. What comments do commissioners have about this ordinance? Yes, please. Commissioner Kroll.
So I just had a quick question. I really do appreciate all the folks that have come and testified. I do think that the 100-foot rule, I saw you nod, Todd, was that that is a state requirement that it has to be 100 feet because there are so many properties out where we are that it's just, you might as well not even do this because it's not going to work. So I want clarification on that. And would that be something that we as a county would have to appeal to our state senators or state reps to take that under advisement to have a modification of that?
Commissioner Carlson, yeah, that's correct. It's a state rule and something that we are not able to do anything about. A change would be needed to state statute to allow that to happen.
So we're allowed to be more restrictive than the state, but not less.
But laws are often amended with advocacy. Step one. I want to, go ahead, Commissioner Peterson.
Sorry. But the 100 feet rule is only for non-historic properties, correct? Or is it
Correct.
for both? Okay.
Only for rural ADUs.
That was just that clarifying point. Thank you.
I want to make sure that I understand the water issue that our last speaker brought up, that due to state rules, this is another example of state rules that, again, advocacy could play a big role in, but not something that we can change. Is that fair?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
The one allowance within the groundwater restricted areas is if you are in a district of some sort or community water plan, so that is a possibility too, and there are properties that are like that, so we could confer with the person that testified and see if there are any opportunities there.
Commissioner Carlson.
Okay, I had two more clarifications. So, if you have a historic ADU and you're building an additional home, you don't have to worry about the 100 feet. Am I right on that?
That's correct.
Okay. And with the critical water area, let's say, there's places in east of the mountains that they have homes that, they may be connected to a lot of things, but they have a cistern for water. Could someone in a critical water area have a cistern that they bring in water and use that for their potable water in their dwelling?
I think it depends on the water source. If the water source is a well and they're in a critical groundwater restricted area, then they are not allowed to have a rural ADU.
But if they purchased water, say from a water company, and had it trucked in from a cistern, like into a cistern of theirs that they use, would that, I'm just trying to think, like, in the meantime, people, while legislation may or may not pan out on this, would that be a workaround that they could have their potable water in a cistern that they purchase and have filled?
Because they would not be taking that water from a well, I would suggest that, yeah, it would be allowed.
I'm not sure. I think we would want to check that, because if the state law says cannot be in a groundwater restricted area unless you are within a public system of some sort, then that they would still be in that area. But it's something that we could look at.
Yeah, but that's specific to wells, though, to water that is.
Yeah, I think we just need to look at the language before we could say.
Great questions. Any additional questions? At this time, I invite a motion concerning this ordinance.
I so move.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Carlson,
An enthusiastic aye.
Commissioner Fry,
Yes.
Commissioner Just,
Yes.
Commissioner Peterson,
Aye.
Commissioner Rosenberry,
Aye.
Commissioner Whips,
Yes.
Vice or Chair Monteblanco.
Yes.
Looks like we have 7 in favor of this ordinance. Motion passes.
Thank you so much. Closing that. Next item, consideration of minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes for November 19th, 2025? Hearing none, without objection, the minutes of November 19th, 2025 are accepted as submitted. Next, do any commissioners have something they'd like to share with us at this time? Y'all are making it easy on me. Okay. Without objection, we are adjourned. Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.
Thank you.